Hi guys, Grant Richardson here. In this video, I'm going to give you some tips on how to score at least 7 for pronunciation in the IELTS speaking test. This video targets native Cantonese speakers, but people from other language backgrounds will definitely find it useful too. First one, bitonal intonation. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, if I speak like this, you can see that I'm only using 2 tones, a high tone and a low tone, like this. Actually, there are probably 2 more tones. For example, when I talk like this at the end of a sentence, you might hear the tone fall. And when I ask a question, then the tone will go up. So you have 4 tones. You're not speaking Mandarin and you're not speaking Cantonese. You're speaking English. And English has intonation. And you need to use intonation in the IELTS speaking test. If you don't use intonation, or if you're using bitonal intonation, like I just demonstrated, you'll be limited to a 5 for pronunciation. If you use intonation sometimes correctly, then you'll be limited to a 6. So that might be why you can't get above 5.5. If you get a 6 for fluency and a 6 for grammar and vocabulary, but you continue to use bitonal intonation throughout the exam, then you'll be limited overall to 5.5. If you want to get a 7 for pronunciation, then you need to use intonation consistently. So how do you do that? Well, it's very difficult if you have the habit of using a bitonal intonation. And it's probably not your fault, because I've noticed that in Hong Kong, some Chinese teachers of English even use bitonal intonation during dictations, for example. So it's quite common, and these teachers, by the way, are very experienced and very qualified. So I think it might be part of your culture, and if everybody in your culture is doing it, then you don't notice it and it seems normal. But you can't do this in the IELTS speaking test. So what I recommend is you try to copy the intonation patterns of native English speakers, or even candidates of the IELTS who score 7 or more. Because to score a 7, you need to show consistent use of intonation with only very minor inappropriacies. So for example, you could play back this video and try to copy my intonation. And you might notice that people who use intonation appropriately use a high tone only about 2 or maximum 3 times in a sentence, or in each clause of a complex sentence. And the other words are unstressed, or they use a medium tone. So you should be trying to get used to using a medium tone as well as a high tone, and only use the high tone for the most important words, normally 2 per clause. Okay, let's move on. The next most common pronunciation error would be the TH sounds. Notice I said sounds and not sound. Well, there are 2 types. The first type is voiced. The second type is unvoiced. The voiced TH sounds like this. and it's in words like this, that, those, these, and there, other, another. And if you mispronounce this, you might pronounce it as a V sound, so this, that, or a D sound, which is more common, dis and dat. And if you mispronounce these words using the V or the D instead of the TH, people can understand you. But you're making frequent mistakes with basic sounds of English. And that will limit your pronunciation score to a 6. So if you look at the descriptors, you'll see if the candidate can be understood, generally understood, but is making frequent mistakes with individual sounds, then they will be limited to a 6. So you really need to say it correctly. So don't be lazy. If you want to get a 7, you need to practice pronouncing the TH correctly. The other type of TH, of course, the unvoiced sound, sounds like this. And it's in words like think, thank you, Thursday. So what would it sound like if you mispronounce it? Well, it depends on which country you come from. And Hong Kong people normally mispronounce this as an F sound. Think, thank you, Thursday. We can still understand you, but it's not the correct pronunciation. So again, you'll be limited to a 6. Okay, let's move on to the third type of problem with Hong Kong English. Consonant clusters. What do I mean by a consonant cluster? Well, these are consonants that go together in a word. For example, the N and the K in words like think and drink. It's the nk sound. So how does a Hong Kong speaker of English sometimes pronounce these sounds? Well, they sometimes drop the K sound. So they will say dring and thing instead of drink and think. The consonant clusters can also occur at the beginnings of words. For example, the BL sound in blue and black. And these are often mispronounced as boo and back by dropping the L. So you need to pronounce both the B and the L, blue and black, not boo and back, because that's a completely different word. And if you mispronounce consonant clusters and it forms a different word, then you're causing comprehension problems for the listener. So they have difficulty understanding you. And if you have a look at the descriptors, if the candidate is making errors with sounds and they cause problems for the listener, then they could get as low as 4 in pronunciation. If you are getting most other things correct in your pronunciation, but you're making these kind of errors which cause some difficulty for the listener, then you'll still be lower than a 6. So the maximum will be 5. So it's very likely that you'll be getting a 5 or even lower if you mispronounce consonant clusters. So these ones are quite important. Okay, so that's about it. Of course, there are other problems with pronunciation, quite a lot actually, which I could go into in another video if I hear enough of them and I think that they need to be corrected. But these are the main 3 that I could think of off the top of my head.